it going, man?
Hey, good. And how are you?
I am great. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, likewise. I think we're all. You can hear me pretty clearly.
Yeah, I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, crystal clear.
Perfect. Yes.
All right.
You ready? Yeah, we should be good to go. Are you guys good on your end?
We're all good, Rock. Everything's set up we need.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay.
Right on. Again, thank you, man, for doing this. Appreciate it. Our podcast is all about your journey in music and how you got to where you are today.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, that helped a bit on your lighting on your face too. Right on. Cool, man. So tell me where you grew up. I knew you were from Australia, correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I grew up first and foremost in a little town, little beach area in Queensland, somewhere called the Sunshine Coast, which is southeast Queensland. That's where I lived until I was about 18. And then I moved to a place, probably, you might know Sunshine Coast from a little town called Noosa, which is like a classic backpacker stop and a fantastic surfing wave, a bunch of points. And then when I was 18 or so, I moved into Byron Bay in Northern Rivers, which is kind of like not just like one of the backpacking kind of meccas, but a very international crowd. And that's where I started busking for a while after. Yeah, that's where it kind of all kicked off, was I really started, busking and playing little cafe shows and markets from, 5 to 9 times a week. And then it just built from there. And then I until this year, spent most of my time on the road touring nationally and internationally.
Wow. Well, how did you get into music? You said you moved, after you were 18 years old, or you moved around a bit, but how did you originally get into music?
So I was writing for, I guess, from probably about 13. I was kind of doing creative writing, and I was actually pursuing more like freelance journalism.
Interesting.
Like a little creative pieces in different surf magazines. And after that, I still was continuing to do that on and off through school. I was homeschooled until I was 13. And then
nice.
I went to like what we call senior year, years 10, 11, and 12. And at that time I wasn't playing any music. I was just, I was kind of just doing what I needed to do to get my grades. So I wasn't kind of held back. And, and that turned, so I graduated really young. I graduated a year ahead. So I was about 16 when I graduated, and had my marks and thought about going into a couple of different university things. But at that time when I graduated, shortly after, my parents bought me my first guitar, and I'm left-handed. Yeah. So I wasn't just picking up guitars. I started to try and play right-hand guitars upside down every now and then.
Okay.
But you don't get that far. And so,
yeah. Do you know the band the Ataris?
No.
They're a band from here in the West Coast in the United States, and the guy is a lefty, but he plays a right guitar, and he plays it upside down. It's really weird. Like, he can make the chords like backwards, so he's playing it left-handed but strung the correct way, but he's playing it all like it's just bizarre.
It's actually, yeah, it is totally possible. And I was, I wasn't actually planning to do music. It wasn't something I was setting out to do, but my parents were like aware of how much I enjoyed writing. And so it just kind of became like maybe we know you like writing and maybe you'd be into something like this. And at that particular time, maybe shortly thereafter, was working at a live music bar, collecting glasses. So I was opened up to the scene of a lot of live music and a lot of, creative influence. I started to intern at another surf magazine, and I was working a coffee shop at the time. So it's kind of like this melting pot of, I think that really all this creative kind of explosion that happened all at once. And really quickly just started, I just taught myself basically through YouTube and small bits by my little brother and my dad. And playing by ear.
Oh, wow.
Started.
So both your dad and your brother both play guitar too?
Yeah, my little brother was already playing guitar and taught me some of my first chords, and my dad was already playing guitar, but he never learnt properly, and so he didn't teach me because he didn't want me to do the same. I did the exact same thing, and I just learnt by ear. The apple far from the tree.
That's so funny.
Yeah, man. So it wasn't a big plan. I wasn't like in school doing arts or anything like that. I did 2 sciences, 2 maths, and it just became this way to my writing became. It just shifted direction into songwriting, and and never looked back. I was still working part-time jobs. Maybe like as soon as probably 6 or 12 months in, I started trying to do open mic nights and just go and perform 2 songs, or got my first cafe gigs, which I was wildly unprepared for. And from there, just learnt on the job, you know, and the last time I was employed doing something else, I was 19. And I remember the day that I quit, and
tell me about that. That must have been epic. Like, I'm done.
It was a pretty funny moment. I remember, admittedly, actually, I remember getting to work early despite being hungover, which is quite funny, looking back now. And just because cafe work particularly was like, I mean, we have a good wage relatively here in Australia. We don't have tips, which is what I guess, like, that's what that whole scene and job is predicated on in, like, that's how people make their money in America.
Yeah. It's all tip based. Then they can pay you under what you would make as like a minimum wage job.
Exactly.
Because they just assume that you're going to make tips, which is crazy.
Which is crazy. But yeah, we could go into that, but we won't. But yeah, I just remember being, pretty broke, already doing a couple of gigs, and my maths was really simple. I was like, I could be just as broke, but play 2 more shows a week, have more time to surf. That was like my early career choice, was I'm going to be just as broke, but I'm going to like what I do, like love what I do. And I'm going to get to surf more. So it seemed like a good equation to me at 19. And that's what I set out to do.
Wow. So once you get the guitar, and you already had, obviously, you can write, you write stories, you had that in you. What was the first song you wrote? Do you remember?
I reckon that's a good question. I reckon probably the first song I wrote, I just cringe. I don't even want to say the title, but I'm going to. I reckon the first song I wrote was called The Cutest Voice. And that might be like, 2000, early 2011. One of the first songs I wrote shortly thereafter, within probably a year into picking up the guitar. So that would be September or October in 2011. I got my guitar on the 31st of December and 30th or 31st of December in 2010. And one of those early songs I wrote for my first EP was a song called Gone, which is still which I re-recorded several times, but is actually, I think, one of my most played songs ever, which is just too funny.
Is it say the Pocahontas song next to it?
Yeah, I wrote that September 2011, which is just insane. And it's still a crowd favorite, which is just funny. So it's nice to have those sort of things. And I think what's important about songwriting at that time is you don't have a peripheral vision. You just write. It's not necessarily to get something in return or with a greater perspective than I'm going to write the song because I'm like an emotional 16-year-old boy, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that song was on your first EP, you said? Gone? Okay. Well, tell me about, you self-released your first EP, didn't you?
Yeah. So self-released the first EP. It was called Feels Like Home. It only ever made it onto SoundCloud. So it's pretty, and I sold a lot of copies just busking.
Oh, okay. So you had that recorded, and when you'd busk, you just sell it as you're playing?
Exactly, because the cafe would probably provide you maybe a tiny little bit of cash, but sometimes it wouldn't even pay you, but they'd give you the spot and they'd get you a meal. And so then you would sell your CDs, you know, that EP I sold for $5 or $10. And that's how, I started. That's really how I grassroots started my career. I was self-managed and primarily self-booked until 2015.
Wow.
So yeah, I was driving to the shows, setting up the PA. I did have the help of, believe it or not, a lot of help from people who would come to my shows. Like there was a couple hilarious stories where, you know, how I started touring basically was I would ask people who often had seen me busking while passing through Byron or on holidays, and I would post on Instagram and ask who would host a house show. And then
Oh,
people would put their hands up and I'd get in contact. And so it was this really like grassroots community based thing. And that's how I got around the country playing shows at first, was doing backyard and house shows hosted by fans.
whoa.
So it was really cool, a very strong sense of community. And I had a lot of friends who helped me at the time, but really till 2015,
Uh-huh.
probably at the point of playing 150 to 200 cap shows, there was like, that was the time that my sister started managing me, my older sister, who wasn't a music manager, but she was really, you know, that was sort of her personality and she was keen to give it a shot. She'd managed a lot of different shops and stuff like that, but wasn't in music, but was really excited to get it going. She's still my, we founded a record label together with my father in 2018. So we still work together today.
That's
She's
awesome.
in the office now. And so it was, we have up at that point, I was just uploading stuff. I was driving myself. There was a fair while where it was drive yourself to the gig, drive the 8 hours, set up the gear, do your own sound. I would check people off the door. I'd set up the events online. I'd do the tickets online myself. But when I handed over to Annika in 2015, like it was a mess. It was like, you know, I hadn't checked my email in months because it was just short. And, but I kind of created a demand that we needed two people. I couldn't, you know, before that I still managed. Whereas by the time there was really a 2-person problem, that's when Annika came on board. And since then we've just been, had an incredible ride.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I'm looking at, excuse me. You have so many streams on Spotify. Like, I mean, you're just killing it on there. And I want to know, like, what was the turning point in your career? Do you remember, like, you know, a certain song, like a song going, you know, massive on SoundCloud or something? What was kind of like the turning point? Do you remember?
That's a really good question. I think one of those turning points was probably a song called Simple Things that I think it's gone gold so far in Australia, which is awesome. The original version, I recorded it twice and the original version went gold.
Wow.
Which is great. And that was one of the songs that was a bit of a, what's the word? It was a bit like it was a shoulder above the rest.
Okay. Yeah.
Probably the song that helped probably break me a bit into the streaming world was a song called Runaway, which is definitely still in my top 5. And that was a song.
That one's mass. I mean, I'm looking right now on Spotify. It has almost like 43 million plays.
And that was cool because that wasn't like an overnight thing, but once it started getting its run on, it never stopped. And it was one of the first songs that just started getting picked up in playlists and stuff like that. But a lot of my early success in both Europe and Australia was hugely due to the amount I toured. I did it pretty old school and just toured like a maniac. And so by that time when Runaway probably started doing well, I was playing and selling out maybe, you know, 250 from 100 to 400, 500 cap venues at that time.
Wow.
And and we, you know, before I started getting played, so I've always been independent, we've always released my music independently. And before I had radio play, we were already doing selling out from, you know, sold out a 3,000 cap room in Melbourne and sold out, you know, another 2,000 cap room in Brisbane. And that was with just grassroots touring. That was not with any radio play. We hadn't started our record label. We were like completely independent, didn't even barely have any third parties we worked with. So I would definitely say that it was a hugely grassroots effort and word of mouth. And that's where I think that for the amount, I feel like I get a lot of streaming for the amount of people that listen to my work. And I think that's because there was really an ethos that I set up early on that like I always loved writing albums. So I had albums available very early on in my career. And that I think had people get interested in the whole body of work. It wasn't just one single and set and forget, you know. Got very invested and became a part of the story, you know. And next thing you know, we fast forwarded to, you know, this most recent album that did really well. And you know, the last tour we did, which was in Australia, was 32,000 people sold out. And so one of the shows was 12,000 people. And yeah, man. And so it's been a very grassroots kind of almost old school approach, and feel very, very lucky for it.
Yeah. Wow. And especially like, I mean, being in Australia, that must be even harder to do because it's like quite a big gap in between the big cities, right? I mean, if you tour Australia, you're only playing like 4 cities, but
that's exactly
they're far apart too, right?
When you do headline shows, you play like, you know, you play your 5 shows or your 6 shows at most. And that's where early on I really toured hard, playing, like I played one tour, I played 50 something shows, and I played like pretty much every regional town between, well, not every, but a lot of regional towns from where I was on the East Coast, and drove all the way, the whole coastline, playing shows all the way around to the West Coast.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is, I don't know how many Ks it is, but it's pretty incredible. So we did a couple tours like that, like a lot of regional touring. And I think that also helped, not just being in a city artist, and it certainly has helped bring people from regional areas for city shows, because definitely at this point they're also with international touring schedules because of touring in Europe and starting to tour in America and Canada. It was time I didn't necessarily have the time, you know, with 120 shows last year, I put my regional efforts, so to speak, directed towards Europe and directed towards, you know, the cities in Europe and the multiple cities in North America. So yeah, it became a kind of natural progression to start playing those bigger shows in the city, and they were really, really good fun.
Wow. That's crazy was that all through, like you said, Instagram and asking people like, hey, can I play at your house or whatever? Is that how you're getting into these, you know, these little towns that weren't in the big, you know, Melbourne or whatever?
I loved playing places where I loved traveling, like seeing other parts of the country. And I really liked, I often liked those regional towns because where they were with surf. And so I was happy to go there just to like surf. And it became, but that's how it was. It was like backyard shows and house shows. And then we'd hire a hall because the house show got too big, and then we'd hire a small venue, and all of a sudden it became a medium-sized venue. And then it got its own kind of run on, you know? And I think, yeah, that showing that dedication to the people, probably like what happens in North America as well, when people who are just road dogs and they're just out there playing shows to the people all year round. Like I think particularly further reaching cities or communities or towns really respect that and really appreciate it. So that's how it happened, really. And then it just went from, you know, I think I started touring internationally pretty early again in my career. I actually did my first run of shows in Europe in 2015, and they were all house shows in backyards and like little cafes and stuff. So it was, again, a really grassroots start in Europe, and America was the first one where we started off playing to more than house shows, so to speak, you know, because I'd met a lot of Americans and Canadians along the way. So I had a bit of you know, and Spotify and streaming had started to build. And so the North American continent was one of the first where there was already kind of some people to play to. And we just had to, you know, oh man, I love it. I love playing over there. Had a really great last run of shows, and Obviously this whole thing went down, the whole world situation. And so we haven't been out. We were planning to go back this year, but I had such a great time touring North America, and I really look forward to getting back.
Nice. So you've came here to the States and everything to play?
Just a couple times. So like, again, and yeah, in the States is a whole different game in terms of like, there is so many cities, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, yeah, at the moment in the States, we're playing kind of anything from like 100 cap room and to kind of, I think the biggest one I did was maybe 2.5. It's 2.5. Oh, yeah, 2.5. Where was that?
Montreal.
Oh, in Montreal. Okay.
Oh, cool.
Was it in Vancouver, maybe?
No, Montreal and Vancouver.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So that's where we're starting to hit 1,000 cap, you know.
Wow.
Through actually even more of Canada than the States, but there is definitely like, it's funny. It's kind of like the lifestyle thing that I think affects very much in the States. I've noticed like where I have really like, you know, like had a really great show in Boulder, of course, you know, like,
right.
places that were just like, or real surfy towns and stuff like that. But it's a huge market over there and a really different world for touring, you know. Same with Europe. Europe's one bit easier for Australians, because particularly me, because I have a European passport from my mother. So I've got a really good situation with Europe. And whereas with America, particularly as independent or not, getting over there and touring with our visas and stuff, it's much like American artists coming out to Australia. It's a big deal. It's like, it's a long stretch.
Oh, is it hard to get into America to play, like because of the visa situation?
It's yes, in terms of, I think that we've only ever done it professionally. Is nothing, you know, in terms of done it in a way because it's just not worth mucking around with. But it's definitely the visas that are the thing that need lead time and financial backing and stuff like that. So those are the things that you invest into overseas touring that at some points you just can't afford, you know, even if there is people to play to. But again, being very lucky through a very, you know, small but strong support of people who are happy to buy tickets, and a lot of them who have maybe played to once or twice in different areas. And it's, yeah, it's good fun.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you, you mentioned touring when COVID hit. Were you on the road when coronavirus when it all started?
Yeah, so we were like, my stuff had gone to the freighting company, and so much thankfully hadn't left Australia yet, but our whole touring kit on a pallet ready to go. And so it was a last minute pull, and thankfully it was the right call. But yeah, I did 120 shows last year, roughly, around the world. And we were due to maybe do like another 80 or something this year.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was you know, look, it's come with its positives and it's come with, I would have loved to be out on the road. It's also nice for the body to have a break, you know, which you don't your body. But I was going to be doing, I guess, my last run of shows for our album cycle, which is the current one being Laps Around the Sun. So we're just going to go back over there and smash out, you know, come back to those really successful spots and play more music, but it'll just have to be for next year.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So the most recent record you put out was Laps Around the Sun, but you've put out songs like this year, like Don't Get Caught Up. And I saw that you released a record. Is it like a split with Horror Show?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and that's the most recent release of all. So the most recent album, like you said, was Laps Around the Sun. We've since Laps done 3 singles and this EP. Yes, I'm like guilty of definitely putting out a lot of content. Horror Show is a cool one because these guys were one of like the first artists to like this kind of hip hop rap group, these 2 guys, but they're really almost poetry based a lot. And they're one of the first artists that really inspired me to go, wow, you can tell a really detailed story with a lot of emotion in the space of 4 minutes. That, you know, inspired me as an ethos. And yeah, I bought tickets to their show. I did a cover on their songs, you know, it was like, you know, waiting post show to meet them like a full fan. And years later, couple of years ago, he actually got on stage and performed that cover, which I performed all over the world, performed in North America and Europe and around Australia. And it was kind of like ones that my fans end up really loving. It was one of those defining covers that my grassroots crew loved. And so he got on stage and came and performed that song with me at one of the shows, which was just so awesome. And that's when the conversation started. Hey, let's try and do something new together. And from that, we kind of put together. Well, they wrote new lyrics for this song for one of my songs called Heaven, which is one of my actually sneakily more popular releases. I don't think it's in the top. It's definitely on the top 5, but I think it went platinum.
Wow. So a few people liked it.
A few people liked it. And they did this really cool flip on it with all new lyrics for the verses, and which is what we called Heaven Part 2. And then on the last run of shows, he jumped on stage and performed it with me. Like we performed it kind of like for the first times ever at these massive shows.
Wow.
The first time in front of 12,000 people. And it was hilarious. It was awesome. And so we recorded those live shows. We had already recorded this, their, I guess, flip of the song, their version of the song with new lyrics. And then I re-recorded that cover. That was a real important take on the song for my fans that loved it so much. And yeah, so it's also cool timing. Very like hip hop rap, and I'm super acoustic.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to bring those two worlds together and kind of separate those two worlds.
That's amazing. And then what about like with sorry, don't get caught up. I think you froze on me. Can you hear me?
Man, just so you can repeat that question. If anyone's downloading, just 1 second. If anyone's downloading stuff, could you guys, could you just text the girls or Rourke to not be on the Wi-Fi just because the connection says it's going funny?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'll let you go again just so it's a clear connection.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you froze. I was going to just say, tell me a little bit like, so with Don't Get Caught Up and the earlier singles together that you put out this year, are those going to be part of another record, or those just kind of singles that you had and you wanted to put out?
They were 100%. They were like songs that I wrote. I wrote one together while I was touring because I was in New Zealand and just feeling this like immense weight of what to do. So that was a song I wrote during our fires in the summer.
Oh, okay.
And it was a song that I wrote the week before I hopped into a studio, and it was released like 3 weeks later. It was like a real inspired, put it out there release. And, and we helped raise some money for drought and fire related stuff through the song as well.
That's cool.
Donating streaming stuff and, donating streaming income, which is really cool. And Don't Get Caught Up was much the same. It was like a song that I just wrote, and I felt like it was my contribution to try and encourage each other to not let the news tear each other apart. Essentially, it was like, I feel like that's one of the, I'd love to hear your opinion. It's one of the challenges of our time we are super polarized in like our opinions and political stuff, and it can make you forget that we're like all human and we're all trying to do our best. And so it was my call to saying, hey guys, let's not get caught up in that, because it's easy to make a lot of enemies online. And it's actually hard to make enemies. Like for the most part, you have to actually go out of your way to really meet people. You can't find something that you have as similar core values. So it was my call to just not, even for myself and for others to try and not, bend to fear. And sometimes the news is predicated on fear. So it's an important
totally
thing.
Predicated on fear. That's what they thrive on, man. I mean,
I was trying to say sometimes to leave room, but yeah, they are.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can say sometimes when they're doing like a report on some dog or something that, saved somebody. But for the most part, we love to hear about other people's misfortune.
100%. Yeah. And that's something that, those were releases that were just on the spot kind of releases. And that's what's cool about being independent. It was like, hey girls, I'd love to release this song. And they're like, cool, we'll make it happen. So That's awesome. And yeah, they are looking to be part of a bigger collection of songs. I have been in studio and there's only so much I can say, but they definitely look to be forming a part of a new collection of work that might be an album.
Very, very cool. I can't wait to hear it. Have you been writing and recording during quarantine, or have you been able to be creative?
Yeah, I think it's a big question depending on particularly where you are, and because like our version of the quarantine and our version of this whole experience is like, I've never surfed as much as I've surfed this last year.
Oh, really? That's cool. They
But
shut our beaches down.
just, yeah, exactly. I'm sad for that because the beach is a very healing place. I think the sun is good for you and it makes people happy. So we've just been so lucky with just, yeah, I haven't surfed this much in years, literally since I became a musician. And our version of quarantine, like, yeah, it doesn't even compare to, for example, what New South Wales or what Melbourne is going through and still going through now. Like our quarantine doesn't compare.
Oh, really?
Like it's different worlds. As in Melbourne, there is a time curfew. You can only go so many kilometers in your suburb. There's mandated wearing of masks. There's the list goes on. It's not something you probably believe if I could tell you everything that's going on there. But
we have we have those similar regulations. I'm in California, San Diego, like just south of LA, and yeah, we have the same. I'm sorry.
I love San Diego. I played Belly Up and the small room at the Constellation.
Oh, really? Belly Up is like, that's probably what is like the spot for you. I could see that. Like, I mean, it's right there on the beach. It's a dope room. But that's awesome. Did you get to surf out there in Solana Beach when you were in town?
It was actually so funny because I actually met a guy called Rob Machado, who's this surfer.
I know, dude. I know exactly who that is.
Because I met him once years before busking in Byron, and him and his wife were so lovely. They stopped and watched, and I was like, "That's Rob." I was like, "Holy shit!" Pardon me. I was like, and
but you can swear.
Thanks, man. And it was they bought me a takeaway pizza, and it was just like they were super nice. And so years later, we finally got to meet up when I was there, and he took me surfing and stuff, and that was really sick. That was really fun. Picked me up. I think I had like what I was wearing in a pair of underwear. He's like, "No worries, guy." Had me sorted with a wedgie and a board and everything.
Oh, sure.
So that was cool. Yeah. So San Diego, to be honest, if you live there, like that's hugely like. It is so much like where I'm from. It's ridiculous.
Really? I've never been to Australia. I need to get out of this country for not now, but obviously when it all lets up. But I've always wanted to go. Yeah, especially out there. A really good friend of ours, and he's in a band called Unwritten Law, and they're a big thing out there in Australia. So every time they'd come, like, yeah, it was always cool to see that, but I haven't had a chance to go. But that's awesome. And also when you said you played the Belly Up in the green room, there's like a huge poster of Rob Machado that's signed by him and stuff. Did you see that?
Yeah, it was too funny. Yeah, popping up because the studio where I've been recording. It's this beautiful photo, and it just so happens to be him surfing as well. And I haven't sent him a picture yet, but I was just like laughing. I was like, can't get away from it, eh? It's awesome. So those are the sort of connections that is really nice to make along the way, where you turn up all of a sudden to San Diego and like you've got someone who shows you around. And, I felt the same way about being in Montreal, in Quebec. I got to go surf the river wave, and I got to go to the local place for a coffee and got to go to the bagel spot, those sort of things, they're so invaluable in touring. That's for sure. So yeah, man, for a long way to answer your question, we totally have found a time to be creative during this whole period. I went into my recording with a plan of what I was going to record. And this is the first time I went and recorded, started recording songs, and I'd just be writing songs along the way. And a lot of them made it onto the album. And what I mean is that there's probably like, half a dozen songs that I wrote that were written during the time, They were written during the time of recording and being in this period. So it's like, that's a new thing for me. And I've always found a way to be creative. I'd say that there's some artists who like go to an studio to write an album, and that's awesome. But because I lived in a van for a long time, I lived in a van for like the better part of 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I learned how to write wherever I was, and that's still my process today. Is just if a song, I don't force it, but if a song pops up, I'll just write it, whether I'm in the back of a bus or parked up somewhere down by the beach, or like I'll just, when the song comes, try and catch it, you know?
Yeah, totally. Wow. What about like live streaming stuff? Are you doing any of that?
We did a couple shows early on, and now we're just trying to figure out how to, because again of the extension of stuff and not being able to go over to America or Europe as soon as we'd hoped, just trying to figure out how to make a special event. I've definitely done a couple live streaming things through Instagram, and a couple with YouTube, actually, like the Australian team reaching out and us doing like a collaborated thing. But yeah, it's definitely something we're going to do more of, particularly in a nice, beautiful environment. And yeah, it's what we will do while we can't tour. For me, it doesn't compare, and I'm sure for the people as well, I throw so much off like connecting with the crowd in real time. And so it's what all of us will do as artists in the meantime while we can't do that, because people still dearly need the music experience. I know I do anyway.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's funny that you said that, you know, it is what you can do now, but it's not the same thing. A lot of artists I've talked to are always like, yeah, it's really weird when you finish the song, you just are sitting there, like you don't hear like an applause or anything. You can kind of see comments, but it's just like, I can imagine it being pretty weird.
Yeah, I'm particularly because it's like a good thing for your fans and to play music, and you do get some sense of connection. You do connect with people all around the world. But the being in a room together, you know, and singing, that's like, it's just dimensions apart, you know?
Sure.
So, and a very powerful experience, I think, like for the person playing and the crowd alike, you know, it can be there's some shows I've seen as a fan, watching Mumford & Sons, for example, playing this place called the Sydney Myer Music Bowl, which is where I actually ended up playing this summer. But watching them headline this venue, and it was like almost a religious experience in terms of like, that's how strong it was, you know, to watch how into it the crowd was, and the singing, and like just the sense of unity. So that was pretty illuminating on like, that's the level of, that's what it's all about. That's what live music's all about to me. And looking forward, happy to have try to make really good use of this time creatively, and rest up and look after, you know, you surf a lot and do a lot of yoga and spend time with family. And then definitely that will bring a big reinvigoration for getting out on the road.
Exciting. Well, I can't wait till this all blows over and you're able to tour again. And hopefully we'll see you at the Belly Up here in San Diego.
Go for a wave.
Yeah, exactly. So when you come out here, we'll have to definitely meet up. But I have one more question for you, dude. Thank you so much for taking this time to talk with me today.
No, man, thank you. It's like, it's this, I love podcasts. I love long form. I think it's particularly upon some, watched a really interesting documentary, you know, that had some awesome stuff, which you might have watched already, the Social Dilemma. I watched it for the first time last night.
I haven't, dude. I've watched my wife and I have not had a chance to sit down and watch it yet. We were going to watch it over the weekend, but I think we're going to have to do it this week, but I'm super intrigued. Is it good?
Yeah, there was, you know, like anything that's, you know, good, isn't like, there was some things I didn't necessarily agree with, but there was, I think, the overarching theme that there's so much good that comes out of what we got going on with our technology, and with like that great power, there's like a great responsibility to people manufacturing, developing like those systems, and how and why they influence people. And so what I like about podcasts on that subject is that it's not it's like an album.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you digest. It's not something that you just listen to for a minute and it's a short quote. It's like you take time to ask questions, to get to know the artist, and so in that sense, I love the fact that we're here on a little Zoom meeting, doing a podcast on the other side of the world. Like that's awesome. And we as a whole independent team, these sort of conversations is where you get new people listening to your music and they get to understand more than just the song they might have heard on a playlist. And that's really important to me and to us. So yeah, we're stoked. Thank you for having us on the podcast.
Man. I was on terrestrial radio, just like, regular dialed radio for 15 years. And I got so sick of all right, here's 5 questions. We're going to put a bunch of questions in a fishbowl and pull them out. It's just all those dumb games. Like I just love having the conversation with somebody. Like we've never met, but now I know how you got into music and how it's just, I'm huge into documentaries too and autobiographies. I just love hearing how people got to where they are, how they achieved success. I think it's really interesting study of people. But anyway, I have one more question. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
That is a good question. Right now, my advice would be identify what you want to do and why. Because I think if I wanted to be a pop star, then the decisions that I'm making now as an independent musician, like with my family team, maybe wouldn't be all the same decisions. Equally, if the goal is to be, to have control over your work, to own your masters, to have freedom of what you write and when, how you release, to not have to necessarily answer to, I don't want to say, it's not because I don't mean it negatively, but you would not having to answer to a massive label, for example.
Right. Yeah.
To meet who's got a big roster. If you want to be independent or if you want to have a very particular way of doing things that are important to you, then maybe take different decisions to what the pop star might do. Neither is right or wrong. It's just like how you want to approach it. And I think that what and why has been questions that have come up at different times. Once, particularly in 2015 for me, that defined a lot of, this is why I'm doing it, because I want to connect with people. And decisions around, for example, releasing albums, not just being trying to get the single before I release stuff, like releasing bodies of work. That's a decision I made 2013. And those sort of things have defined my career and also brought me the success that aligns with my life. I think would be a big challenge is when people work really hard and end up in a situation where wait, this is not where I wanted to be. It might be someone else's idea of success, but for me, for example, living in a gated community because I couldn't go outside safely without bodyguards, because that's the level of my success or the sort of music or the environment, that's not for me. Mm-hmm. If it's for you, that's cool, but it's not for me. So I got to try and make steps that lead me towards having the life I want outside of music as well. And I think when you have that, what am I doing and why, that helps a lot define where you go in your career. And then I think has helped me be stoked with the success that I have and the good and the bad that comes with it.